Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I have the second installment in my book versus movie series. The first video that I did, I talked about movies that I liked more than the original books that they are based off of. And I told you guys that I wanted to do two other videos in this series. One of movies that I like more than the books, which was the first one, then books that I like more than the movies, which is today, and then the next and last video is going to be books and movies that I like equally. So today we are going to be talking about books that I think are better than the movie adaptations. Sorry also, heads up for the lighting. As you guys know, I have been getting over a cold for the past week, so if my voice gets all weird, I apologize, but we are just going to push through and make this the best that we can make it. Anyway, I have 23 books and movies to talk about, so without further babbling on, I'm just going to get right into it, and I would love to know if you have a list as well, which is what I loved reading about in my last video. Anyway, so yes, leave those down below in the comments. I would love to know if you agree or disagree, and anyway, without further delay, let's just get right into books that I prefer over the movies. Okay, we are starting strong with the first one, and I feel like this might surprise you guys, but that is my favorite book, Anna Karenina, and the 2012 movie adaptation. I adore the 2012 movie adaptation, which is why I feel like it might surprise you guys that it's on this list of me preferring the book over the movie. Because in some ways I do love them so much equally, but I wish that there was more Levin. So if you've never read Anna Karenina before, Anna Karenina is not the only main character. We also have another main character named Konstantin Dmitrovich Levin, who I love with my whole heart and soul, and he is my favorite fictional character in the world, in all of literature, and he is played in the movie by Domhnall Gleeson, who I love as an actor, and he does such an amazing job portraying Levin. I just wish that there was equal parts Anna and equal parts Levin in the 2012 movie adaptation. The movie adaptation is directed by Joe Wright, who also directed Atonement and Pride and Prejudice, and he is such a talented director. The whole movie, I always describe it as a moving work of art. It just looks like a painting come to life. And what I love is how Joe Wright took the idea of society, Russian society, as theater, and completely ran with that and kind of portrays the story through this theater setting. I just think it's so brilliant. And then of course all of the society scenes are portrayed in that theater setting, and then when we see a lot of Levin's scenes are in actual scenery outside. It's not a set, and it's in real homes, and so it just shows you the duality of the theatrical kind of fakeness of, or at least putting on a face, putting on a front of society, and the natural beauty and charm and truth to Levin and nature. I just think it's such a beautiful juxtaposition. I love it so much. I just wish there was more Levin. So that is why I prefer the book over the movie. Also, it's the book. Like, you can't, I don't think any adaptation will be able to capture what Leo Tolstoy captures in his writing. So that's the first one. Sticking with the Leo Tolstoy trend, the next book and movie that I want to talk about is War and Peace. Specifically, I want to talk about, I wrote it down, the 1956 adaptation, which has Audrey Hepburn in it and Mel Ferrer, and I love that adaptation. I love Audrey Hepburn. She's one of my favorite actresses, if not my favorite actress. The BBC miniseries of War and Peace is not on this list, because, spoiler alert, I love it as much as I love the book. Again, I feel like you can't really compare because what Leo Tolstoy does with his writing is so unique and you can't replicate it in any other media or medium, but I love the BBC adaptation so much, so it's not on this list. What is on this list is the 1956 adaptation with Audrey Hepburn, because they cut so much of the book out of the film. I love Audrey Hepburn. I love everything that she does. She played Natasha. She did a fantastic job playing Natasha. But they just cut so much out of it and they changed so much of it, and it just made me very frustrated. So I love War and Peace. It's one of my favorite books. It is just, obviously you can see from my annotations, also Anna Karenina, heavily annotated. Love these books with my whole heart. And it's so hard to adapt such a big story, and I feel like, same with Anna Karenina, maybe I would have felt differently if Joe Wright adapted it as a miniseries like they did with the BBC miniseries. I'm not sure, but I love the miniseries because they were able to give us so much of the story, unlike the 1956 adaptation, which is just a movie. So yes, that's War and Peace. The next movie adaptation that I like a little less than the book, I prefer the book over the movie. Again, another really surprising one because this is one of my favorite movies, and it's because it's an adaptation of one of my favorite books, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am talking about the movie from 2010 with Carey Mulligan, Andrew Garfield, and Keira Knightley. Also, Domhnall Gleeson is in that adaptation as well. Love the cast, love the film, love it so much. That movie is near perfect. It is a near perfect adaptation. They didn't include my favorite scene, and I am still so frustrated about it to this day. One of my favorite scenes, it's in between the character of Tommy and Kathy, who is played by Andrew Garfield and Carey Mulligan, and it's this scene where they go looking for something. I don't want to tell you what they're looking for, but they're looking for something, and they find it, and it's this exchange between the two characters that I love with my whole heart and soul. And when I was watching the adaptation, I was praying that they would include it, and they didn't, and I was so upset. It is almost a near perfect adaptation. The costume design is phenomenal, the set design fantastic, the settings, the locations where they film, beautiful. The whole color palette of that movie, if I could live in a movie, just the scenery, if I could just live in the scenery of a film, it would be that one. It is so gorgeous. I love everything about it, and the acting is incredible. The way that they adapted the story is really near perfect. It's just that one scene that I was like, you couldn't give me that one scene. But anyway, Never Let Me Go, one of the best books I've ever read, my favorite book of this year. All I want to do is reread it. Highly recommend reading and watching it. But I just, yes, please be angry at them not including that scene with me. If you know what scene I'm talking about, can we talk about it? Because I need to be angry with someone that they didn't include it. Anyway, moving on, because I'm just still not over it, as you can tell. Okay, the next ones are also going to be a little bit surprising, because I do love the movie adaptations. But the first one, the next three are all Fredrik Backman books. The first one is A Man Called Uve, and I love this book with my whole heart and soul. It is the first book that I read from Fredrik Backman. It started my whole love for his books. He is my favorite contemporary writer. I am talking about the Swedish movie, which came out in 2015. There is a new movie coming out, I think, next year, I think in the beginning of the year. It's called A Man Called Uve, and it is the American version, which is starring Tom Hanks. And I am so excited because if you guys don't know, Tom Hanks is one of my favorite actors, maybe my favorite actor. I love him so much. I watched the trailer looks amazing. I'm just so excited. Anyway, okay, we're talking about the 2015 adaptation that is in Swedish. Is again near perfect. There's just something about Fredrik Backman's quality of writing that I think is untranslatable in the way that you're translating it from the written form to a visual media. Obviously these are translated from Swedish, but yes, it's so near to being a perfect adaptation for me. There's just something in his writing that the joy I get from reading his books is something that you can't get in a visual form because it's only a quality in his writing, if that makes any sense at all. If you have never read Fredrik Backman before, if you want to get into his writing, I cannot recommend starting with A Man Called Uve enough. I love Beartown. You guys know how much I love Beartown. I'm going to be talking about Beartown in a little bit, but I would recommend starting with A Man Called Uve, just because I think that this is his debut novel. It is so powerful, it is a perfect place to start, and it's just one of my favorite stories, and I love it so much. And the adaptation? Near perfect. Near perfect. Okay, like I said, we are going to be talking about Beartown, specifically the Swedish miniseries from 2020. So they came out with a TV show miniseries, also in Swedish, and it was amazing. I loved it so much. Again, it's the same thing with A Man Called Uve. I love the quality of his writing that is untranslatable in a visual form. Beartown is such a heartbreaking story. I would recommend looking up some trigger warnings before reading or watching, but it is just, again, like his writing, there's something about it that is so singular and unique and hard to capture in any other form besides reading it in its original form. Again, almost a near perfect adaptation. I love when books get turned into mini-series because you get less of the issue of taking away parts of the story that you wish they included. Usually when it's a mini-series, they're able to include a lot more, and so you have a better chance of getting more of your favorite story. I love the fact that it's Swedish, that it's in Swedish, because it feels so authentic. That's the one thing that I'm nervous about with A Man Called Uve is it going to feel super Americanized? I don't know. That's what I love about the authentic Swedish adaptations. Highly recommend if you haven't watched it. I feel like my voice is getting so weird. And then the next one is my last Fredrik Backman, and that is Anxious People. This novel was adapted into, again, another mini-series, just one season for the whole book, so there aren't any other seasons. I do believe that there are going to be more episodes of Beartown because Beartown is a whole part of a series. I loved it. It came out in 2021. Again, it's in Swedish, so I love how authentic it feels. Again, it's just, there are parts of his writing that are untranslatable and that they don't compare to reading the original form. Fredrik Backman's writing is so unique and so personal to him, and that it's a joy to witness and a joy to read. It's such a great adaptation. Again, love how authentic it is. I thought it was beautifully done. I also love when a book is adapted into a series with actors that you aren't familiar with. That's one thing that I loved about Normal People by Sally Rooney and the adaptation on Hulu, is that I didn't know Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal before watching it. That's also going to be in another video. Normal People is going to be in this series, but in the next video. I love them as actors, and I love when you can kind of picture actors as characters without thinking of them as other roles that they've already portrayed. So that's something that I do love about A Man Called Uve, Beartown, and Anxious People, those adaptations, because they're Swedish, you don't know the actors. Anxious People, love it, highly, highly recommend. The next one, I had to talk about it, I keep talking about it, that is Game of Thrones. We are talking about the TV show. 2011 was the first season, so this is the first book. But the whole series, obviously the whole series isn't canon, so I am going to mainly be talking about just the parts of the show that are direct canon from the books. I love the show. I just finished the show. I really did enjoy season 8. I know so many people don't like it. My opinion is that what they took from the show, I love the show, but I do prefer the books because the books explain the world and give you more background in the way that they can't include every single detail and explain every backstory in the show. That would just take literally forever, and it's already a very long show. Honestly, I wish it was longer because I love it so much and I love being in that world and I love that world in general. But what I found was, so I watched the show first, and then when I went back and I read the book after having watched season 1, everything made so much more sense and you got a lot more background. There's so much going on. There are so many things that are unfamiliar to you because it's a fantasy book, so you're trying to understand the world. But at the same time, when you read it, you get that opportunity to understand the world because George R. R. Martin's explaining it to you as if you've never been in the world before because you haven't. But with the show, I think that's a little harder to do. So, love the books. I'm going to continue reading them, and I'm very excited. So, I do prefer the books over the show, although I love, 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 love the show. The next book is The Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov, and I am talking about the Soviet adaptation from 1988? Yes, from 1988. And I love the adaptation. I watched it on YouTube. I love that it was in Russian because, again, it felt very authentic. I love foreign films. I also love black and white movies. I love older movies. There's so much beautiful artistry behind older films. Anyway, there's just, again, something about the story that I feel like is untranslatable, and in a way it's almost more fun to, I guess, imagine it in your head than actually see it outright in front of you. I don't know if you guys ever feel that way when you imagine something in your head and then you actually see a different visual of it. Not that it's disappointing, but it's just sometimes it's even more fun to just have that image in your head. Anyway, so that's The Heart of the Dog. Love it, love the adaptation, thought it was amazing, so glad that I watched it, but there is a quality of the book that I just love in the written form. The next one is the book Evgenyonegan by Alexander Pushkin, but the movie adaptation Onegin from 1999. Yes, from 1999. The main character, Onegin, is portrayed by Ray Fiennes, who does an amazing job. I love the movie adaptation so much. I think it's beautiful. The sets, the costumes, the acting, everything about it is so perfect, and it's a near perfect adaptation. Everything that happens in the story really happens in the movie, and they don't really leave much or anything out. Just the one thing that you can't do in a visual form is create the beautiful, lyrical, poetic, rhyming scheme and the format of what is so beautiful about Evgenyonegan, because it is a story in verse, and what I love so much about it is that it is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and the way that Alexander Pushkin writes it is so unique in itself, and it's so beautiful that you miss that when you translate it, of course, because you can't perfectly translate the way that he rhymes his stanzas and the structure that he gives to his writing, but you can portray the story and you can explain the story. Everything else, it's a perfect adaptation. I love it so much. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorite adaptations. Love Onegin. It was my favorite book of last year. Cannot recommend reading it enough. It is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, and if you like it, I highly recommend watching the adaptation. I think it's gorgeous. There's just something about the writing that you can't translate into visual media that I love so much. The next book to movie adaptation is The Giver by Lois Lowry, and the movie adaptation from 2014. Jeff Bridges portrays The Giver, and I love Jeff Bridges. He has one of my favorite voices ever. I just love his voice so much. Another movie that he is a voice actor in is The Little Prince. That is going to be in another video. Spoiler alert, the next video in the series. But anyway, so I love that adaptation. I think it's beautiful. The Giver I originally read, I think in 8th grade in middle school, and I didn't love it, honestly, because I didn't really understand the concept. That was one of the first dystopian books that I ever read, and it was new to me as a genre, and I just didn't really understand what was going on that well. And then I reread it when I was in my first year of college, I think, and I fell in love with it. And then I read the whole series. It's in a series of 4 books, so it's a quartet. And I love the Giver Quartet. It's one of my favorite book series. The adaptation, I love. It also has Meryl Streep in it. I love Meryl Streep. So what I love is that there is this concept in The Giver that everything is black and white in this utopian society. And then eventually color is introduced. I'm not going to tell you how color is introduced, but it's introduced in a really beautiful way with the concept of the giver and the receiver. And I love how they did that. I love how they translated that. I just love this book so much. I've reread it so many times that I just feel like no adaptation will capture what I love about Lois Lowry's writing and the way that she tells the story. Again, like so many of these other books, it is a near perfect adaptation. I just feel like there's a quality to the writing that I feel like is untranslatable in a visual form, although they do an amazing job translating certain other aspects of the story, like I said, when they introduce color or when they introduce the idea of the giver and the receiver. I'm not going to say too much just because I feel like in certain dystopian worlds it's best to read it without knowing too much, just so you can kind of be pleasantly surprised or pleasantly puzzled and figure it out on your own. But I love The Giver so much. I also love the movie adaptation. I just love the book so much that no adaptation will kind of come close to it. But it did come close. It did come close, just not perfect. Okay, we are on to the last stack of books. The first book that I have on here is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I'm talking about the adaptation from 2020 with Lily James. I love Rebecca. I think the idea of the book is so smart and brilliant, and I love the setting, I love the writing, I love the characterization, everything about this book. There's so much about it that I love, especially the atmosphere. And what I love about movies is that atmosphere is one of those things that you can capture really well in the way that you design a set, that you design the costume designs, that a character or an actor can portray a character. It all kind of has aspects of the atmosphere in it. So I love when kind of can look out for atmosphere in the visual form. I thought they captured the atmosphere pretty well. There was just so many things about this adaptation that I just didn't really like, and I can't even really put my finger on it. I think the main thing that I didn't love was the relationship between the husband and wife of the novel. It felt very different to how it felt in the book. It just felt like two very different stories, even though they were adapting the same story. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Did you watch it? Did you feel this way? I would love to know your opinion. On its own, I feel like I would have liked it a lot more if I hadn't have read the book, but because I read the book and I love the book, it was just kind of disappointing. I have not watched, I think it's the Alfred Hitchcock version. I definitely need to watch the Alfred Hitchcock version because I know so many people love that one, but specifically I'm talking about the 2020 adaptation with Lily James. I just didn't love it. I thought it was okay. I just didn't love it. I love the book though. Also, same goes for the next book, and that is also by Daphne du Maurier, and that is My Cousin Rachel. The adaptation is actually the cover of this one. I really don't like movie tie-in editions, but I found this secondhand for like 50 cents at my library, and I wanted to read it, so that's why I got it. The movie is from 2017. Again, it's just the same thing with Rebecca. I liked it. I liked the atmosphere. In this one, I feel like they captured the atmosphere very well. Again, it just felt like two very different stories in a way. Like, it was the same story, but the way that the actors portrayed the characters just kind of felt very different to how I read the book, if that makes any sense. I prefer the original. I thought it was okay. The costume design was beautiful. The set design, the locations, it was a gorgeous film. Just the story itself, I felt like I preferred it in the written form. Also, there's an aspect of Daphne du Maurier's writing that I feel like you really can't capture in a visual media, where it's so eerie and creepy and you don't really know what's going on. And I feel like sometimes in a visual form, you just lose that, if that makes any sense. So yes, that's Daphne du Maurier's My Cousin Rachel. The next one is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I'm talking about the adaptation from 1997. Yes, 1997. I love this adaptation. Again, it's almost near perfect, but there's just something about Virginia Woolf's writing that you can't translate, like I keep saying. Although I do love this adaptation. One of my favorite characters is Septimus Warren Smith, and I love the way that they portray his story in the movie. I think it is beautiful and heartbreaking. It's the same way that I felt when reading it, when watching it, and I thought it was a very close, almost perfect adaptation. Again, it's Virginia Woolf. You can't, you can try really hard, and they do a very good job at adapting Virginia Woolf's writing, but it's Virginia Woolf's writing that I feel like why you read and love Virginia Woolf is because of the way that she's so unique at storytelling and writing and her stream of consciousness, and just, it's something that you can't capture in visual form that makes her writing so unique and so powerful on its own, and I love it. So that is Mrs. Dalloway. The next book is Jane Eyre. I am specifically talking about the adaptation from 2011, which is the movie. I also have watched the miniseries. Didn't love the miniseries. I preferred the 2011 movie, but again, just you can't come close to what Charlotte Bronte does with her writing and the characters. I think they always capture the atmosphere so perfectly. I think that the acting is beautiful, the set design, the locations, costumes, everything about the movies and the miniseries is beautiful. I just feel like there's a quality to the movies that sometimes they feel a little corny. I don't know if corny is the right word, but when I'm reading about the scenes, it doesn't have that corny quality to it. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't even know if corny is the right way to explain what I'm trying to explain. There's just, again, something about her writing that you just can't capture in visual form. Why I love this is because of the writing, and also obviously the story itself, which is why you're watching the adaptation. But there's just something so unique about it. Yes, I love the adaptation. The 2011 adaptation has Mia, I never know how to pronounce her last name, and Michael Fassbender. I think they did a great job. I love how they portray the story. There's just a uniqueness to the book that you can't capture, like I said about so many of these other books. Can you hear how nasal my voice is? I need to take a drink of water. I feel like I need a sneeze or something. Anyway, moving right along. The next book-to-movie adaptation is for Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I'm specifically talking about the adaptations from 1939 and 1992. I do prefer the adaptation from 1992. The 1939 adaptation, I think, is the Laurence Olivier adaptation. Although I love Laurence Olivier, I just felt like I don't know why I didn't like the adaptation. I have no idea why. I watched it a while ago and I don't really remember what I didn't love about it. I do prefer the, 1992 adaptation. I think that's the Ray Fiennes adaptation, and Juliette Binoche, I think that's her name. I have also seen the Tom Hardy adaptation too. For some reason, I don't like any adaptation of Wuthering Heights. Again, I just feel like because there's a quality to Wuthering Heights and Emily Bronte's writing that you just cannot translate in visual media. You love it because of the way that it's written, and you love it because of the way she writes the characters, but then you portray the characters, and it just loses something, and I have no idea what, but it just always happens. I don't know why. I feel like maybe because even in Jane Eyre, sometimes the characters are so morally gray and you can't really love them or hate them. So I guess watching it is different to watching it in your head when you're reading it. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it as I'm talking, but I'm having a hard time. If you have any idea what I'm talking about, please let me know, because maybe you'll be able to describe what I mean, or at least how I feel, because I'm having a hard time doing that. But anyway, love Wuthering Heights. You just can't capture the magic that she captures in any other form other than the original, and that's, I think, when you have a classic. The next book-to-movie adaptation is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I am specifically talking about the adaptation from 2020, which I prefer the book over that adaptation. That adaptation, they added some magical realism elements to it that I just felt like I didn't love for some reason. I understand why they included magical realism, and it could have been done really well, and I think it was done well if you weren't comparing it to the original story. The adaptation from, I think it's the 90s, I grew up watching that adaptation. I'll put a picture up. I love that adaptation. It is near perfect. I probably love them equally. Just feels like the book come to life. I grew up watching that adaptation, so it has a very special place in my heart, so that's probably why I feel the same way about the book and the film. See, this story I think is so beautiful when you can actually visualize it because of the way that they visualize the actual secret garden for you. You could watch it bloom and come to life, and you can see the character development of the characters. It's just such a beautiful story, and I love watching it kind of take shape in a visual form. So yes, I do prefer the book over the 2020 adaptation, but I do love the 90s adaptation equally to the book. The next one is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I am talking about the adaptations from 1974, which is the Robert Redford adaptation, and then the 2013 adaptation with Leonardo DiCaprio. I prefer the book over both adaptations just because I do love both adaptations. If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the 2013 adaptation as my favorite with Leo DiCaprio. Love him so much. He's my first celebrity crush from Titanic, so him in any role I love. You can't go wrong with Leo. But anyway, I love The Great Gatsby. It's one of my favorite books. Again, I feel like there's aspects of the writing that you just can't capture in a visual form. I love the way that they adapt The Great Gatsby. It is a perfect adaptation. I feel like they don't really leave anything out because it is quite a short novel. I just love F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing so much that you can't really capture what he does in a visual form because it's so unique to the writing, like so many of these other books. So yes, love the 2013 adaptation. I just prefer the book a little bit more because the writing is so amazing. The next one is a more recent adaptation, and that is A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig, with the movie that just came out last year in 2021. I love this book. I reread it every year in the Christmas season. I thought the movie was amazing, a near perfect adaptation. Again, I just love the quality of the story as a story itself. I think it works so well as a book. And it's one of those books that, okay, I'm going to sound like Harry Styles when he was talking about Don't Worry Darling, and he said, what I love about the movie is that it feels like a movie. What I love about this book is that it feels like a book. It feels like a classic fairy tale. Like the books that you read as a kid in Christmas time that just feel like Christmas. And that's what I love so much about this book, and I do love the movie adaptation. They did an amazing job, near perfect. I just love it as a book. Quoting Harry Styles left and right. This is also illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, Chris Moulds, so I love the fact that this is not only a story to read, but also a visual story to view as through the illustrations. There's just a quality to the illustrations that I think is so perfect. The movie is live action. I would love to see, this is getting very specific. I would have loved to seen it as a 2D like animation where Chris Moulds' actual illustrations were kind of the art style of the animation, but that's getting very specific. I love the live action. I love the movie. I love it as a book because it feels like a book. The next book is actually a play, and that is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. I am talking about the adaptation from 2002 with Reese Witherspoon and Rupert Everett and Colin Firth, and I forgot the other actress's name. Judi Dench is also in it. I love The Importance of Being Earnest so much. It's probably one of my favorite plays, but I really feel like the way that they express the lines, the way that they say the lines in the 2002 adaptation, I feel like they lose the humor of it. There was this one stage performance of The Importance of Being Earnest that was on YouTube that I watched years ago, and it was perfect. The way that they delivered the lines was hilarious. I never laughed so hard in my whole life. And I cannot find this stage adaptation anymore. I think they took it off of YouTube, and I am devastated because I love that stage performance of it so much, and I just feel like they so lose it in the 2002 adaptation. There's a scene that involves a handbag, and it is hilarious. It is so funny. And when I watched it in the 2002 adaptation, I didn't even chuckle. It just completely lost the humor for me. I don't know if that's just a me problem, but when I watched it as the stage adaptation, I was cracking up. I was laughing so hard, and I don't know why, but they just lost it in the 2002 adaptation, and I was just so upset because I wanted to love it so much. I love Reese Witherspoon, I love Colin Firth, I love Rupert Everett, so it was Judi Dench, so such amazing cast of characters. But I just feel like the way that they translated the humor, it just didn't translate in the way that I was expecting it to. So yeah, that's just a me complaint. But anyway, love the play so much. Highly recommend reading it if you haven't. So good. The next book to movie adaptation is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. This is the adaptation from 2017. I love Brian Selznick so much. You guys know how much I love Brian Selznick. He is the illustrator that has inspired me since I was 9 years old. He is the reason why I am an illustrator, why I want to be an illustrator. He is just amazing. And I love the movie. I think it's done so well, translated so well. His stories are written in words and pictures. And in this book, there is one story that we're following set during the 1920s, I believe. And that is a story all in pictures. And then the other part of the story is told all in words. And then at one point, the story that's told in pictures and the story that's told in words, the story that's told in words, I think takes place in the 90s? I'm not too sure. But anyway, they meet at one point. And the way that it's done is so beautiful. And they also translated it really well in the movie. I just prefer the quality of the book because what Brian Selznick does with words and pictures is already a visual experience, and it's something so unique, and I just kind of prefer the magic of Brian Selznick's books in their original form, although I did love the adaptation and I thought it was beautifully done. I just feel like Brian Selznick, you can't do any better than Brian Selznick. He already is such a master at storytelling in a visual form and in a written form. So, love Wonderstruck. Love the movie. A very, very close, almost perfect adaptation. But yeah, there's just a magic to his books that is only in his books, in a way, if that makes any sense. We are on to the second to last book-to-movie adaptation, and that is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This is one of my favorite books. I am specifically talking about the adaptation from 2006 with Dakota Fanning. I love this book. Again, it's a whole aspect or concept of loving it as a book itself rather than watching the story unfold in a visual form. E.B. White's writing, I love it so much. It's so beautiful. It's so perfect. I could just read his writing all day long. I love him so much as a writer, and I think he's so inspiring. And so they're just his quotes that are captured in the actual book in the written form that aren't translated in the story because, you lose the narrator in a way. I love it in the original form, although I do love this adaptation. I grew up watching this movie. I love this movie. It holds such a special place in my heart, but the book is just so unique and so beautiful, and I love it so much. So that is Charlotte's Web. Then the last book is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and I am specifically talking about the adaptation from 2013. And again, it's done really well. Set design is beautiful, cinematography is beautiful, locations, costume design, acting, all of it's great. I kind of feel like this could work maybe better as a miniseries. I feel like there is a miniseries of it, so maybe I should watch that. But as the movie, I thought it was great. I love it as a written story so much. I love all the details. I love all of the side plots, and just the intricacies of Charles Dickens' writing in this book is so brilliant that I feel like unless it's in a miniseries or it's done in a certain way, the charm of Dickens' writing is what you love so much about reading Dickens, is what I love so much about reading Dickens, that you can't really get when you translate it into a visual form. Like when he describes the mist or the fog or the condensation on the window as goblins' tears, just like uniqueness like that you can't translate certain metaphors and images in a visual media, because it just wouldn't work. So that's the unique power of his writing, and that's what I love so much about the book. So anyway, Great Expectations, love it, beautiful adaptation, but I do prefer the book. So those are all of the books that I prefer over the movies, although so many of them are some of my favorite movies. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Sorry it's long, sorry I rambled through it, sorry I think I repeated myself about 1,000,000 times, but I would love to know your list of movies or books that you prefer over the movie adaptations, your opinions on any of the movies or books that I talked about today. I would love to know. I would be very interested to hear your opinions, if they differ from mine, if they're similar to mine. I'm very excited for the final installment of books and movies that I prefer equally, that I love equally. So definitely look out for that in the near future. Again, hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a fantastic day reading and watching some amazing books and movies, and I will see you soon in another video. Happy reading!